We appreciate it. How much is the anticipation or the level? Is it as excited now than it was back in the fall when Brigham Young when they found out they'll be joining the Big 12? What's it like right now?
I think it's percolating. I think it's tough to replicate the high that BYU and its fans experienced when the invitation was extended because there's such a time lapse between the invitation and the actual entrance into the league. So while there are certainly a lot of folks working crazily hard behind the scenes to make this come off the right way, from an outsider's perspective, a fan's perspective, they're having to wait a long time till competitions are held and results are completed and you start showing up in the league standing. That said, we know that for example, AD meetings coming up. That's a step. Scheduling plans being released in the summer and fall. Those are steps. And so I think as each of these things happen, the reality of it is more concrete, and the excitement is again exponentially, if not incrementally, present and added.
With this schedule they've been playing, obviously they've proven that they're ready to go to a Power 5 league right now. There's no doubt about that. They've been doing that for the last couple of years, playing pretty much any and all comers, anybody who'll schedule them. Recruiting wise, how have you seen maybe an uptick in interest in BYU, and that they are somebody who, because of their religious affiliation and academics and all that, would have to recruit a little bit differently than anybody else? But have you seen that interest and buzz grow even more outside the community of people interested because of the Big 12?
Oh, there's no doubt that P5 inclusion is a factor. And just in state, there will have been some recruiting battles BYU lost to Utah over that P5 membership that now, they can be more head-to-head with Utah in that instance. And so if especially a good player from the state of Utah is choosing between those two schools, it's much more equitable unless they're, going to BYU for reasons other than what might influence, someone looking at P5 versus non-P5. And again, on that note, you kind of brought it up, BYU is a unique fit. BYU is going to draw, student athletes who might not even consider other schools because of their desire to attend an institution like BYU. But when it comes to those who aren't necessarily, growing up, in the area or have always thought about BYU, now BYU gets in the door with those student athletes because of its P5 membership. There's no doubt about that. And they'll have to have an uptick in recruiting because of the caliber of competition in the Big 12. Now, there has been this great, decade-long period of transition where they've been able to play so many P5s. And so as a result, have to recruit better to win a fair share of those games. And they've done that. But I think even though BYU casts maybe a narrower net than most schools, it'll be a wider net than they've been casting maybe over the last 10 years.
Greg, there's a lot of talk, around college football right now about divisions and conference title games and all of that. I know that the Big 12 is really kind of trying to put the bow on the exit of Texas and Oklahoma. That's got to happen first before, everything happens. But there's going to be that year lap over. But after that, once the Big 12 settles in, I know they're having discussions on what divisions could or could not look like. Is there any preference or like a wish that you would have or that maybe BYU fans as a whole would have as far as a potential permanent team they'd want to play every year, or a division set up and what that would look like?
Well, the trend right now is coming back to the Big 12, which is divisionless. And I realize it's different if you're bringing in 4 and keeping Texas and OU. Divisions might make it. There are 14 team leagues out there that are going away from divisions anyway, and so it could be that the Big 12 is ahead of the curve that way, and already having a championship game without divisions. Everyone seems to want to do that too. I don't think anybody would complain if the Big 12 did end up, divisionless. And to me, the bigger question kind of hit on it was, do Texas and OU stay for a year? Do they stay for 2 years? Does something happen to where the transition is so clean that 4 come in and 2 leave at the same time? I think all these things are on the table. And those will be interesting questions to have answered before, BYU ever plays a game in this league, is just how long, does it stay a 14-team conference? How soon does it go to 12? And does it all happen in one tidy package, or is this kind of lag transition period? Those are all things that I think will be kind of interesting to see have answered. That said, schools I'd like BYU to play every year. Well, the Cougars have already had, previous history with TCU. They've been in 2 other leagues with TCU. They were with TCU in the WAC and they're with TCU in the Mountain West. So I'm going to say TCU right off the top. And then Baylor. I think those two teams are schools with which BYU can have and has forged maybe natural rivalries. I think you saw this past fall when BYU played down in Waco. The two presidents seem to really have, kind of a common linkage in terms of purpose and maybe even kind of the profiles of their respective institutions. Then the game and the reception the BYU fans got there, I thought was tremendous. I would love to see Baylor and TCU be two schools that BYU sees on an every year basis at the very least.
Was there any irony and we did not know about the Big 12 expansion at this time a year ago, up until middle of July. Heck, we're at Big 12 Media Days, and then pop, the story hits Oklahoma, Texas, and the SEC. How ironic was it the same year that Baylor and Brigham Young were going to play each other?
You want to repeat that last part? You cut out for like the last 5 seconds.
Yeah. How ironic was it that all this happened in a year that Baylor and Brigham Young were going to play each other and start a 2-year series?
Yeah, and it ended up being a sneak preview, right, of what was to come. It was just so fortuitous because when they scheduled, it was going to be nothing more than an attractive non-conference contest, and then it became something that kind of gave us a look at what the future would look like for BYU down in Big 12 country. So it was incredibly fortuitous, but I thought it also resulted in something it felt kind of natural and organic that BYU and Baylor could kind of kick off a rivalry of sorts and then have Baylor come back the next season. Baylor will be playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium here on September 10th. That'll be BYU's home opener. And so that's going to be another, incredibly fortuitous date. The fact that the first home game for BYU this season will be against a future Big 12 rival. It's the only future Big 12 rival that BYU has on the schedule this year. So that will make it interesting as well. And so I'm just glad it turned out the way it did, even though we didn't know at the time what it would really mean. It does kind of give you kind of a ramp up. And I really do think that BYU found out last year on the field and off what it was like to play in the Big 12, what it would take to compete and win in the Big 12, because Baylor was a very good team that day. And although BYU played well, didn't get destroyed, there was, there were some differences and some gaps BYU saw would have to make up to compete with teams like Baylor on a year in, year out basis in the Big 12. I thought it was a great experience to have happen. And I also like the fact that, Jeff Grimes had gone from BYU to Baylor, and Coach Mateos had gone from BYU to Baylor. There was some crossover there, some familiarity there, and that was a neat part of it as well.
Thank you for letting that happen, by the way, Greg, because those two have been remarkable at what they meant to the Baylor offense.
Well, we missed them, clearly, when they left, but I think BYU did a fine job in kind of trying to fill their shoes. No doubt BYU's happy with the direction of the offense and the offensive line. But those are two pretty special people, and just so happy to see them having success. And that was one of the neat things too, was being able to kind of rekindle that association and catch up with those guys last year in Waco and have that be a part of that whole equation as well.